Hello, my friends. I think of you as friends because I'm going to share something very personal with you. My name is Jane and I'm 16 years old. I hope that my story will give you something to think about after you listen to it through to the end. It will be about death, family, and veganism. A pretty bizarre choice of subjects, don't you think? But soon you'll see how all these things are connected to each other. As it often happens, my story's roots go back to my childhood, namely to my parents' divorce. I was only 6 years old, so I do not really remember that period of my life. I vaguely remember that there was a court hearing, after which I stayed with my mother in her house, and my father left. But I have no idea what reason brought my parents to court. I seriously doubt that it was because of me. For the next 10 years, my dad did not take any part in my life. He paid a considerable amount of money to my mum in alimony, regularly and always on time, so I don't think he was some kind of a bad person. But in order for you to understand what kind of a father he was, I will only tell you one thing. I never saw my dad once during all this time. You might think he moved somewhere far away, like to Alaska. But you're wrong. All this time, we lived in the same state of Los Angeles. Sometimes Dad called me, but mostly just to wish me a happy birthday or a Merry Christmas. My life with my mother was normal and pretty calm, and I didn't notice that something was seriously wrong in our life. The most obvious thing was that during this entire 10-year period, my mum didn't really have a personal life. She absolutely refused to talk about my father, as well as about any other men in general, so I didn't try to interfere. Another worrisome sign was that she filled all this emptiness with hard work, which was stressful, and it consumed a lot of her time and energy. I couldn't understand why my mother worked so hard. We always had enough money to live on, but it was probably her work that seriously undermined her health. My mother had suffered from insomnia for many years. She went to various clinics and consulted various specialists, but nothing helped her, so the doctors only gave her prescriptions for sleeping pills. It helped, but my mother's body adapted to it, so she needed to either increase the dose or switch to a medicine that was stronger. My mum did both. As a result, about 9 months ago, my mother took so many sleeping pills that she simply didn't wake up. Never. Yes, now she's dead. And then finally I met my father. I had no other relatives, and when I, along with social workers, informed him of what had happened, he volunteered to take me into custody. I wasn't yet in any condition to be fully aware of what was happening, but he was my father. Who else was going to take care of me? I agreed to move in with him, especially since at first I thought that my dad was a pretty nice guy. He was a tall, thin, middle-aged man. He was in good shape. He had been seriously practicing yoga for a long time. Like my mother, my father also lived in his own house. He didn't have any family or pets. Dad worked as a designer and in general was a fairly successful person. Sounds good, right? So what's the problem, you might ask? The problem was that my father was a vegan. A pretty aggressive vegan. At first, I didn't even notice what I was eating. I was so stressed. Dad was cooking for me, and that was good. In addition, although he practiced a raw food diet, for me he cooked delicious vegetable stews with beans. But as soon as I recovered a little and started to get used to my father and his new life, I mentioned that I hadn't eaten fried chicken for ages. Oh, I think that these words, like a spell, called out some kind of a monster. My father was unpleasantly surprised that I still didn't understand what lifestyle he was leading, and explained to me that he was a vegan. Vegan, not even a vegetarian. He also added that he would never allow any meat in his house. Dad even tried to shame me, explaining that such a highly developed creature as a human being, especially his own daughter, simply could not eat other living creatures. On the one hand, I understood his position. On the other hand, I like juicy burgers. I like pepperoni pizza. I like cheese balls. I like pasta with meat sauce. I love fried egg and bacon sandwiches. And I had to abandon all of that because my old man did not eat meat? I was not ready to make such a sacrifice. But Dad was adamant. So we couldn't come to an agreement. My resistance was really weakened, though, because I'm an extremely bad cook. When Dad realised that I wasn't going to become a vegan, he tried to limit my pocket money and personally cooked me vegan meals for school. This angered me so much because I was always rational about money and never spent that much. And being left without any cash in my pockets was humiliating. I quietly suffered for a few days before I finally lost my temper and defiantly tossed my vegan dinner into the garbage can, saying that if it went on like this, I would complain to social services. This worked. He began to give me pocket money again and seemed to forget about the conversation we had. Much to my relief, because I felt ashamed for my tantrum. However, now I could eat normal food, as long as I didn't bring it home. I tried to bring home semi-cooked products or a bucket of wings from KFC, but Dad was persistent. He took everything away, threw out the wings, and gave the rest to the neighbour's dog. When I realised that my burger would be eaten by our neighbour's pug, I was outraged and decided I was going to make a statement, defending my right to be a full-fledged meat-eating mammal. I bought canned dog food at a nearby store, returned home, sat down at the table, opened the cans and waited for Dad to see me with them. Of course, I didn't even think of eating it. I just wanted to make a statement. It wasn't long until Dad returned home, saw what I was doing, and began to patiently watch me chop a piece of canned meat with a fork and put it in my mouth. And he didn't stop me. Can you imagine? I lost my temper again, and as I was running upstairs to my room, I heard him shouting something about the animal. But at that time, I wasn't really angry at my father. That happened another day, after another incident. When I moved to live with my father, I went to a new school, and of course, I didn't have friends there. But still, I managed to get noticed by a group of cool, popular guys. I invited them home to watch a movie, and of course, we bought some pizza on our way home. This was the first time I had brought friends to my dad's house, and I couldn't even imagine that he would start his preaching right in front of them. But I was wrong. He literally pulled the pieces of pizza with cheese and pepperoni out of our mouths and squeamishly took a slice of pepperoni with 2 fingers and began to explain to us that it was made from dead animal flesh and we just didn't respect ourselves if we allowed ourselves to devour dead flesh like some zombies. After his lecture, he defiantly threw out the remnants of our destroyed pizza and added that he would now cook us some crunchy bread with sesame paste. But the guys could hardly wait until he stopped talking before they escaped. The very next day, a new piece of gossip was born at school. Jane lived with her freak of a father. That was it. On the same day after school, I packed my things, went down to the subway, and after changing several trains, reached the city where I had lived with my mum before. My mum's house was still there, closed until after I turned 18, and would be able to decide what to do with it. I knew that my father would easily find me there, so going inside didn't seem like a good idea. I also didn't want to visit any of my old friends, so I just spent the night in the park, making sure that nobody noticed me. In the morning, I went to the local cemetery. I wanted to see my mum. I simply sat at her tombstone for a few hours when I suddenly realised that my father had appeared behind me. Anticipating questions, he explained that he had secretly installed parental control software on my smartphone and apologised for it. He said that he was really worried about me. I was so surprised that somebody was worried about me so much that he would follow me with the help of software that I didn't even get mad at him for taking my phone. I also wanted to hear what else he had to say, and it turned out that he also missed my mum very much, and that he loved her very much, and that he was ready to give up everything for her except for his vegan beliefs. And once, when my mum came home from a long business trip, she saw that I had become terribly skinny because he was only feeding 6-year-old me fruits and vegetables. She started shouting at him, saying that he was killing their daughter, and demanded that he disappear from our lives completely. Dad respected her decision then, but everything turned out the way it was now. We talked for a long time, and it seemed that for the first time we both heard and understood each other. Maybe it was because what we were saying came from the heart. I don't know. But now we have agreed that he will no longer attack me for eating meat, and I'll try to understand his position and at least taste his food. And, Dad really cooks his raw food stuff really well. And in general, I think that he is a nice guy.
Hi, I'm Andy. I've always had a particular sense of humour. I also used to have a girlfriend who I guess wasn't compatible with my sense of humour. Let me tell you how I found out. So my girlfriend invited me to dinner with her and her parents. Blimey, I'd never met them, and I got pretty nervous. You know that milestone that any man prefers to see far ahead. But alas, I knew it must be done. I met them nicely, I should tell you, and it started off in a good way. Then the idea slapped my mind that I should do some comedy to make a good impression and amuse them a little, as they seemed deadly serious. So naive I was. When I saw they were going to serve baked potatoes, I decided to pretend I didn't know what potatoes were. That would be hilarious, I thought. It was, in a certain way, but it also backfired on me. So first, when they served a potato on my plate, I acted really strange. I gave out an impressive mixture of curiosity, confusion, astonishment, and interest on my face. They noticed it and seemed confused, but didn't ask me anything. So I launched my idiotic prank. "This looks very interesting. What is this?" They stared at me, and the mother said, "It's a baked potato." "Oh, interesting. A baked... what is it again?" "A potato." "A potato? Oh, interesting. Never heard of a potato. Looks pretty good." Unbelievably, they didn't see I was clowning. This was the moment I started to suspect they have literally no sense of humour. I knew it would be a humiliating epic fail if I admitted to making a joke. So I decided to act naturally till the very end. They asked me, very incredulous, if I really had never eaten a potato. I sigh and tell them yes. Not only have I never eaten a potato, but I also have never even heard of the word potato. This went on for a bit. The more I insisted, the more they started to suspect I was goofing them. I had to commit 100% at this point. At one point, her annoyed father said something like, "Enough is enough. You're kidding us. Admit it." And I said, "Sir, before today, I never heard of a potato. I still don't know what a potato is, other than some kind of food. I don't know what to tell you." He started getting red with anger. The last straw came when I decided to take a bite of the potato. And when I did, I made a high-pitched noise and said, "Tastes very strange." And that is when the father started yelling at me and the mother kept saying, "What are you doing?" And my girlfriend went to some other room. Finally, the father said I should get out. And I said it was irrational to treat me like this, just because I never heard of a potato before. After that, I left with dignity. What I thought was that people with no sense of humour bore me a lot and that I needed to break up with my girlfriend. When I came home, I told everything to my father, and who thank God is an old prankster. Even worse than me, he was laughing his head off as he told me how to round up the story with my girlfriend in a hilarious way, but it was a surprise. So I texted her and said I was sorry for what happened, and that I was inviting her to my place for dinner with my parents to apologise. I never mentioned it had been a joke though. So she comes to my house, greeted by my parents, and it all starts off very nicely. Everyone's chatting and she's relaxed. The potato story doesn't come out at all. But at one point, while we're clearing the table, my dad calls her aside and asks if potatoes were served at her parents' dinner. When she admits it, he looks alarmed and says, "That's bad. I've always tried to keep Andy away from those creeps." Then he makes an enigmatic face and walks away without going deep into detail. You should have seen her. If she were a less polite person, she would leave immediately, but she remained until the end of dessert, petrified, and looking as if she was at Ted Bundy's house for dinner. She finished her ice cream and she was out in a couple of minutes. Me and my parents were roaring with laughter. I never heard from her since. It could be a sad story if I wasn't deeply convinced you can have many girlfriends, but only one sense of humour. So it's easier to change girlfriend than to try and pretend to be a person you're not.